left off yesterday, talking about migration patterns, what they do. We can increase or decrease the genetic diversity in a population with migration. So who had a population of Skittles that I stole from? Oh, I stole some of your Skittles. So I decreased your genetic diversity. Where did the Skittles from your island migrate to? They immigrated to your island. And did they increase the genetic diversity in your island? Well, yeah, I think you guys had an extinct population, right? Yeah. So, okay. The genetic diversity on their island increased because of that migration event. We don't talk much about human evolution, ancient or modern, but let's think about the U.S. and let's think about populations in the U.S. and genetic diversity. Do you see, in social studies, do you do waves of immigration? Okay. So, let's see, we have lots of British Isles folks in the colonies and French citizens who come here in the colonial period. After the colonial period, first big wave, I think it would be the first big wave of migration post-colonial era. You have two waves, don't you? You have a Chinese laborer wave on the West Coast. You have a wave from Asia. Then 1840s, something terrible happens in Ireland. The potatoes all go horribly, horribly awry. You have a huge wave of immigration from Ireland. You start to see waves of immigration from Eastern Europe. You start to see waves of immigration from the Mediterranean. Do these things change the gene pool in this country? Yeah, of course. Yeah, we've got a diversity of genes. Now, let's think back to pre-European contact. What does the gene pool in North America look like? It's Native Americans. First people, as they call them in Canada. Does that gene pool shift when Europeans start to land on these shores? Yeah. Is the gene pool still shifting? Yeah. It's all part of the normal process. Okay. That's how migration affects gene pool. Now, we get to talk about terrible things that happen unexpectedly. If I had a lightning sound effect thing here, I would make a lightning sound. You guys want to try making a lightning sound? Come on, Gavin, I'm counting on you. I'm sorry, thunder sound. What am I saying? Lightning doesn't make a sound. I need a big sheet of metal to shake. That's how they used to make thunder sounds in the old movies. This is where we talk about drift. In small populations, random chance plays a big role in changing distributions. An individual with all the best traits could fall off a cliff, be struck by lightning, or crushed by a falling tree. Thunk, smush, splat. In small population, gene frequencies can swing wildly, all because of the role of chance. 10 rabbits that are an isolated population. Perhaps they're on an island like Skittle Island. And we're interested in one particular gene. Maybe it controls eye color. Maybe it controls ear length. Maybe it controls having an extra toe on their back claws. And over on this axis, so over on the y-axis, we've got the percentage of the population that has this particular gene. From 0%, nobody has this gene, to 100%. Every single individual in the population has that gene. So if we start out with our 10 rabbits, and 5 rabbits, I'm going to do this in a different color, 5 rabbits have this gene in generation 1. And, just kind of randomly, maybe in the next generation, 70% have it, and then a coyote comes along, and it has nothing to do with the gene they've got, but, kills a bunch, just happens to kill many of those rabbits. So we're down to 30%, which is 3 rabbits that have it. And then the next generation, whoops, all their babies get run over by a lawnmower. Has nothing to do with their genetics. So we go to 0. And from there on out, That gene is not present in the population. Well, if we run this as a simulation, so a computer simulation where we look at all the things that could possibly happen to this population over time, and we put in all the unknowns, all the variables, and we sort of let this thing run, and we run it 100 times, are we starting off with 50%? We might get a scenario where everybody who doesn't have the gene gets eaten. All the rabbits that survive have the gene, random chance, and everybody has it. Luck. There's no reason to have it. It doesn't give them an advantage. It was just sheer luck. And we might run another simulation where, again, we start with 50%, and it goes way down, and then it goes way up, and then they all, again, lose it, and nobody has it anymore. And we might run this 1,000,000 times. And the frequency of that gene might shift pretty wildly. Who here had a very small population on Skittle Island? Did you lose any colors in the first couple rounds? So how many colors did you lose in the first round? 1. How many colors did you guys lose in the first round? 2? So you lost 2 colors right off the bat. Okay. And you didn't get any diversity back. Small population. Almost immediately, we had a color go extinct. Who had the biggest populations? Who had 20 or more? Okay. Did you guys end up with all the colors you started with? No? Okay, you even lost some. Did you guys end up with... You ended up losing some too. Okay, that's fine. And really, 20 is not a huge population. When we say a large population, we're thinking thousands. So 20 would still qualify as a small population. Well, when you have a small population, it doesn't take much of an accident to wipe out a gene, to wipe out a trait entirely. What if we have a slightly larger population? So we've started with a bigger population. Again, we're starting off with 50% of them having it. If we run those simulations again, we tend to see a little bit less fluctuation. Oh, it's still possible for the gene to suddenly be present in everybody or nobody. But we tend to see less of those wild swings. We tend to see fewer scenarios where it ends up completely gone or present in every single individual. We tend to see sort of a less crazy swing effect. We still get some, don't get me wrong. We still get some pretty wild variation. Wild hares. Ha, get it, hares, rabbits. Ha, thank you. Couldn't resist. But we tend to see less of it. We tend to see things staying more approximating the percentage that we had to start with. Now what if we were to look at a population with 1,000 rabbits? Copy. Paste. So I'm going to shrink down my 100 rabbits scenario. Set that over there. And now we're going to look at a 1,000 rabbit population. And we could keep adding bunnies all day. Bunnies are actually very good at that. So now we're going to look at 1,000 rabbits. If we start off with 50% of our population having whatever this gene is, this gene that doesn't make them any better or less adapted for their environment, it gives them blue eyes or a white spot or, I don't know, little frills on their ears. What we tend to see in a very large population is that those gene frequencies over a bunch of generations, well, we might have some dips and stuff. but they tend to stay. We might even have one where something does go extinct. But in general, we start to see less wild fluctuation. So the bigger the population is, the less wild, crazy swings we see in the frequency of a gene due to just random chance. It's a whole different thing if the gene gives somebody an advantage. That's a different thing. But if we're talking about a gene that doesn't really offer an advantage, it's all down to chance. And with small populations, we tend to see huge impact from random chance. In a large population, it kind of evens out. You've got enough individuals that if, your one blue-eyed bunny gets smushed or eaten or falls off a cliff or drowns in an unforeseen puddle, there are other blue-eyed bunnies. It's not going to wipe out the blue-eyed bunny gene in this population. So that's where we say that genetic drift plays a much larger role in small populations. In small populations, especially very small populations, the role of chance is enormous in altering gene frequencies. The bigger the population gets, the less of a role chance plays. The less of a role chance plays. I will tell you that these graphics come directly from an air test question. That was one of the practice test questions. I haven't seen this question pop up on a real air test, or at least not among the released items. But this is something that there's a chance you'll see it again. They want you to understand what genetic drift is. So, here's what we're gonna do when you finish copying this slide. Because I want you to understand what genetic drift is. We're going to treat this kind of like, have you ever heard of the well, okay, back up, Moser, good Lord. Rewind. Have you heard anyone use the words writing to understand? Have you ever heard that? Maybe, okay. Has anybody here ever written a letter that they had no intention of mailing? Just to make yourself feel better when you were really mad at somebody, or maybe you had a horrible crush on them? Okay. You've written a letter you never meant to send. I've got one who will admit to it. That's okay. I've written a lot of letters I never meant to send. Emails are more dangerous because you can accidentally hit send. Letters, you have to go through a little bit more process to get them out to where they aren't supposed to go. So, if you've ever written a letter you never meant to send, sometimes you're as much trying to figure out how you feel about something as you are trying to tell somebody else how you feel about it. Sometimes by the time you're done writing that letter, you understand what you're feeling. That's writing to understand. That's all that is. By writing down all the jumbled up thoughts that are in your head, you're putting it in one place and you're making it concrete and it makes sense once you've written it. There's a similar concept in sort of academic circles, which is when you need to understand a concept and you've got a bunch of fragments, sometimes if you write down your understanding of it and then look at what you've written and go back and edit and go back and sort of move it around and play with it, you understand it better after you've written it down than you did before. So what I'm going to have you do right now, and you can do this in your notes or you can do it on a piece. No, actually, you know what? Do it in your notes. I would prefer that. I want you to write this. So you'll answer this like it was an essay question on the test. Spoiler alert, it probably will be in some similar form. You're pre-writing, and then you're going to turn that in as a snapshot. You got 2 things to work on. Go.